At my daughter's wedding, they put me at the worst table in the back corner where nobody could see me, like I was some old lady they wanted to hide away. I smiled and ate my cold chicken, thinking this nice young man had no clue what was coming his way. 3 days later, he knocked on my door with papers that made me laugh so hard I almost choked on my tea. If you're watching this, leave a comment telling me where you're from. What Jake Peterson didn't know was that this quiet old grandma had been keeping some very big money secrets. The morning started so nicely. I picked out my best blue dress and my favorite necklace. Nothing too fancy, just good enough for my sweet daughter's big day. The hair lady made my gray hair look perfect. Not too much, just nice enough for such a special day. "Mom, you look okay," Lucy said when I got there. She was busy fixing her pretty white dress that belonged to her great-grandma. Okay, like getting a C on a test. I watched my baby girl walk around looking so happy and beautiful. She was glowing like a bright star. But when people started coming in, I could see how things really were. Jake's mom and dad came in like they owned the whole place. His mom, Sandra, had so many sparkly jewels on that she looked like a Christmas tree. She talked to all the rich people but looked right through me like I wasn't even there. "Excuse me," I said to the young man showing people to their tables. "I think you made a mistake with my table number. Table 15, ma'am. Right behind that big plant display." Behind a plant display. They were hiding me behind enough flowers to fill up a whole garden. I walked over to my hidden spot, which let me see nothing except leaves and pretty flowers. From my plant jail I could watch everything happen in the big mirror on the wall. There I was, Rose Miller, 74 years old with lots of life experience, tucked away like an old magazine nobody wanted to read. The wedding was really beautiful, I have to say that. Lucy walked down the aisle like a fairy tale princess, and Jake looked very handsome in his expensive suit. But during the party before dinner, I noticed something interesting about my new son-in-law. He had different smiles for different people. Big fake smiles for the rich guests, polite smiles for useful people, and no smiles at all for anyone who looked like they might need help instead of giving it. "Mrs. Miller." I turned around and there was Jake walking up to me with his biggest, fakest smile. The kind he saved for people he wanted to trick. "Isn't this just amazing?" he said, waving his hand at the party like he had made the sunset happen himself. "You must be so proud and happy." "Oh yes, I'm just shaking with joy," I said, my voice sweeter than candy. "Though I must say, the view from back here teaches you a lot about people." He either didn't hear how mean I sounded or just ignored it like a politician would. I was hoping we could spend some time together soon. Really get to know each other the right way. How nice. Most people usually do that before they marry someone in the family, but I like how you do things backwards. That made his smile stop for just a tiny second. I caught it like a cat catching a mouse. "I was thinking dinner this week, just you and me. I have some really interesting ideas about how families can work together." Family working together. That sounded scary. Well, I do love a good mystery dinner. How about Thursday? Does that work with your busy schedule? Perfect. I know this fancy place downtown. Very private. Perfect for important talks. Important talks about what? My boring stamp collection. My weekly card game drama. "I can hardly wait," I said, fanning myself with my napkin like a southern lady getting dizzy. As he walked away to charm other people with more money, I looked at myself in that mirror again. A silver-haired woman in simple clothes sitting alone behind enough flowers to fill a flower shop. Someone who looked like she probably used coupons and worried about paying for heat. Exactly the picture I had been creating for 2 whole years. During the father-daughter dance, I snuck away to fix my makeup in the fancy bathroom. In that expensive mirror, I touched up my lipstick and practiced looking like a helpless old lady. When I came back to my flower prison, Jake was talking to the old couple next to me, the Johnsons from Harold's old job. They were eating up his attention like it was wedding cake. "Mrs. Miller," he said, looking at me as I sat down, "I'm really looking forward to Thursday." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." As Lucy threw her flower bouquet and the party started ending, I watched my new son-in-law work the room like he was running for president. He clearly had big plans cooking in that handsome head of his. Too bad for Jake. I had spent 74 years learning that the most dangerous fighters are usually the ones everyone thinks are weak. And this old grandma was about to become very, very dangerous. The quiet time after the wedding lasted exactly 2 days before the real show started. Lucy called me every day. Each phone call was full of happy married talk and how wonderfully Jake was treating her. "He's so thoughtful, Mom. Always thinking about our future and money stuff." Money stuff. The word floated through our talks like smoke before a fire starts. How lovely, sweetheart. A husband should definitely think about money all the time, especially other people's money. What do you mean? Nothing, dear. Just that planning money is so romantic. Lucy missed my mean joke completely, which was probably good. Wednesday crawled by like waiting for the dentist. I spent the day doing boring old lady things, dusting Harold's books, cutting dead flowers from my roses, and wondering what my charming new son-in-law wanted to talk about over expensive wine that would probably cost more than my grocery bill. Thursday evening came like a tax bill you don't want to pay. I dressed for my part as a simple widow. Plain black dress that looked respectable but not rich, with my mother's pearl earrings and Harold's old broken watch that still looked nice from far away. The restaurant Jake picked was one of those places where they say water, with a fancy accent, and the waiters look at you like you personally ruined their dreams of being famous. He was already sitting when I got there, looking like a successful young businessman. "Rose." He practically jumped out of his chair. "You look absolutely wonderful." "Thank you, dear. This place certainly is something special." And it was something, all right. The kind of something that made you wonder if they charged extra just for making you feel small. We ordered wine. He insisted on a bottle that probably had more letters in its name than I had in high school. "So," he started, spinning his wine like he was some kind of expert. "How are you handling life all by yourself?" "Oh, just perfectly. 74 years of practice makes most things seem easy." Of course. But surely it gets hard sometimes. That big house, all those big decisions. He was fishing for information like using dynamite to catch fish. "Harold always said I had enough opinions for 4 people. So I keep myself plenty busy." He laughed with that fake business laugh that probably worked great on investors and trusting old relatives. "That's wonderful. But seriously, don't you worry about practical things. Money stuff, legal stuff, people who might try to trick your kind heart." There it was. The real reason for dinner. Dressed up in fake worry and served with expensive wine. Should I be worried about something specific, Jake? Not worried exactly, but prepared. You know how complicated things can get, especially for someone in your special situation. My special situation. Like being a widow was some kind of rare disease. And what situation would that be exactly? He leaned forward, his voice getting quiet like men do when they're about to explain something to a little old lady. "Well, living alone, making big decisions without help, being open to people who might not really care about you. Open to people like him, I guessed. How thoughtful of you to worry about me being tricked. I've actually been talking to my lawyer about protective things for people in situations like yours." Protective things. How wonderfully bossy. What kind of protection are we talking about? He reached into his jacket like a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat. Out came a brown folder, which he put on the table like it was made of gold. Just some basic paperwork. Nothing scary. Just safety measures in case you ever need help making important decisions. I opened the folder like I was handling a live snake. Power of attorney, power over money decisions, medical choice authority. Complete control disguised as loving care. This is quite a lot of stuff. My lawyer knows all about taking care of old people. He's handled many cases like yours. Cases like mine. I was apparently a case now. How interesting. And Lucy knows about this thoughtful plan. She thinks it's brilliant. Really, Rose, we just want to make sure you're protected from anyone who might take advantage of your trusting nature. My trusting nature. The boy had really done his homework. Protected from who specifically? Oh, dishonest repair people, bad money advisors, relatives who might suddenly become very interested in your money. Relatives who might suddenly become interested. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. How smart of you to think of such problems. It's just common sense. These things are much easier to handle before any problems happen. Problems like me keeping control of my own life. I see. And this needs to be done quickly because timing is important with these things. The longer you wait, the more questions people might ask about whether you can make such decisions. My ability to think. He was already getting ready to say I was too confused to make choices. Well, I said, closing the folder and putting my hands on top like I was blessing it. This certainly needs careful thinking. Relief washed over his face like he had just won the lottery. Of course, take all the time you need. Though my lawyer did say that quick action would be smart. Quick action before I had time to think or talk to anyone with a working brain. I'll definitely want to look at this with my own lawyer. His smile flickered like a candle in the wind. Your own lawyer. Oh yes. I know it seems silly, but I'd feel better having someone explain it in words my simple mind can understand. Rose, I really think we should finish this tonight. These things work best when handled quickly. Quickly before I had time to realize I was being robbed. I'm sure your notary will understand that important decisions shouldn't be rushed. My what? Your notary. You did bring one, didn't you? You seem so ready for everything else. The mask slipped completely. How did you know about the notary? Lucky guess. You seem like someone who plans everything ahead. Jake stared at me for a long time, probably trying to figure out if I was really simple or actively fighting his trick. Of course, he said finally. Take all the time you need. But his eyes said something completely different. His eyes said he was done playing nice games with the harmless old grandma. Too bad for Jake. The harmless old grandma was just getting started playing games with him. The weekend went by with fake calm, but I could feel Jake's impatience crackling through the phone like electricity. Lucy called twice, both times casually asking about that helpful paperwork Jake showed you. Still thinking it over, sweetheart. Mom, he's just trying to help. He knows so much about legal stuff. Legal stuff like stealing was just another thing on his job training list. Monday morning brought a call that proved my guesses about my charming son-in-law's true nature. Rose, it's Jake. I hope you've had time to think about our talk. Oh, I've been thinking about almost nothing else. Wonderful. I was hoping we could meet again this week. I have some extra information that might help make things clearer. Extra information. More fancy lies, probably. How thoughtful. Same restaurant. Actually, I was thinking somewhere more private. Maybe your house. I could bring some papers that would be easier to look at in a comfortable place. My house where he could pressure me without anyone watching. What kind of papers? Just some examples of how these plans have helped other families. Success stories, you might say. Success stories about old people who had given up their independence to charming thieves. That sounds very interesting. Wednesday evening. Perfect. Around 7. Wednesday couldn't come fast enough. I spent the next few days doing what I did best, watching and planning. If Jake wanted to play games in my house, I'd make sure the game was set up for me to win. Wednesday evening I got ready for battle. Simple gray dress, tiny bit of jewelry. The perfect costume for a woman about to spring a very expensive trap. Jake arrived right at 7, carrying his briefcase and his most trustworthy smile. Rose, thank you so much for letting me come here. I know this whole situation can feel overwhelming. Oh, I'm not overwhelmed at all. I'm actually finding it quite educational. He settled into my living room like he owned it, spreading papers across my coffee table like he had done this many times before. I brought some stories of families who have been helped by these plans. I think you'll find them comforting. How thoughtful. But before we talk about other people's stories, I have some questions about your story. My story? Yes. I'm curious about your background, your qualifications for managing other people's lives. His confident look flickered slightly. Well, I have lots of business experience. In what kind of business? Investment management. Mostly. For which company? I work for myself now. And before that? Different jobs in money services. Different jobs. How wonderfully vague. How long have you been advising old people about their money decisions? I wouldn't call it advising exactly. More like protective planning. And how many old people have you protected? A few families who needed help. Help they asked for or help you suggested they needed. The room got quiet except for my grandmother's clock ticking. Rose, I think there might be some misunderstanding about what I want to do. Oh, I understand what you want to do perfectly. What I'm curious about is how you do it. How I do what? How you find weak targets, how you gain their trust, how you convince them to sign away their rights. I would never. Never what, Jake? Never target old widows. Never trick them with fake concern. Never steal their independence while pretending to protect them. His mask was cracking like old paint. You're making serious accusations. I'm making serious observations about a serious predator who made a serious mistake. What mistake? I smiled, channeling every bit of strength Harold had ever seen in me. Assuming I was just another helpless widow. Rose, I think you're confused. I'm not confused at all. I know exactly what you're trying to do. The question is whether you know what I'm about to do. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I've been recording this conversation. I'm talking about the private detective who's been watching your activities. I'm talking about the lawyer who's getting ready to file criminal charges. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. You can't prove anything. I can prove everything. Your money troubles, your debts, your pattern of targeting old women. All of it. That's impossible. Is it? Tell me, Jake, how much do you owe in gambling debts? He went very still. How do you know about that? I know everything about you, including the fact that you're not my first admirer. What do you mean? I mean you're not the first charming young man who's tried to separate me from my money. The difference is this time I was ready. Ready how? I stood up, my voice dropping to a whisper that could cut glass. Ready to destroy anyone who tries to steal what my husband spent 40 years building. You don't understand. I'm desperate. I need. You need to leave now before I call the police. Rose, please. We can work something out. The only thing we're working out is whether you leave on your own or in handcuffs. Jake gathered his papers with shaking hands, his carefully made plan falling apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. This isn't over. Yes, I said, thinking of Harold's secrets waiting in the basement. It is. After he left, I poured myself a glass of Harold's best wine and sat in my quiet kitchen. Tomorrow I'd go down to the basement and open that old safe. Tomorrow I'd learn exactly what weapons my husband had left me. Tonight I'd enjoy the look of panic in Jake Peterson's eyes when he realized he'd chosen the wrong widow to mess with. Some predators learn too late that sometimes the prey has bigger teeth than the hunter. Thursday morning, I stood at the top of my basement stairs, holding Harold's key, my heart beating fast with excitement and fear. For 2 years I'd avoided this moment, too sad about losing Harold to face whatever secrets my husband had left behind. Jake Peterson had just given me a perfect reason to overcome my fear. The basement smelled like old paper and Harold's aftershave. The smell still clung to his clothes hanging in the corner. His desk sat exactly as he'd left it. Crossword puzzles, coffee-stained coasters, the reading glasses he'd worn for 40 years. The safe was hidden behind a panel I'd never noticed, made to look like part of the concrete wall. Harold had always been smarter than he let on. Inside I found papers that made my hands shake. Bank statements showing accounts I'd never heard of. Investment records going back decades, legal papers creating trusts and protections I didn't know existed. And at the very bottom, a letter in Harold's familiar handwriting that changed everything. My dearest Rose, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and someone is trying to take advantage of your kind heart. I'm sorry I never told you about the money. $33 million, properly protected and completely yours. I lived simply so we could die rich. And I hid our wealth so you'd be safe from predators. Exactly like whoever made you open this safe. $33 million. I sat down heavily on Harold's old chair, the numbers swimming in front of my eyes. $33 million. More money than I could spend in 20 lifetimes. The letter continued. There's a business card in this envelope for Linda Chen. She's handled everything since I got sick. She knows about the threats you might face, and she has instructions to help you fight back. Don't let anyone steal what I spent 40 years building for you. Use every penny if you have to. Make them sorry they ever decided to mess with my wife. I found Linda's card and called right away. Chen Law Office. This is Rose Miller. I believe my husband Harold arranged for you to help me. Mrs. Miller, I've been waiting 2 years for your call. Can you come in today? How soon? How about right now? Linda Chen's office was nothing like the stuffy law offices I'd expected. Modern, bright, with family photos scattered among law degrees. She was younger than I'd thought, maybe 45, with sharp eyes and a handshake that could crack nuts. Rose, please sit. Harold told me this day might come. What day? The day someone tried to trick you into signing away your rights. She spread papers across her desk. Trust papers, investment records, legal protections I'd never dreamed of. Your husband was remarkably smart. He predicted someone would approach you within 2 years of his death, probably through family connections, trying to gain control of what they thought were modest savings. But they're not modest. No, they're not. $33 million completely protected in a special trust. You control everything but no one else can access it. Even if they somehow gained power of attorney. Even if I signed Jake's papers. Even then. Harold specifically designed this to protect you from exactly that kind of manipulation. I leaned back, feeling like I was seeing my life clearly for the first time in 2 years. So Jake can't touch any of it. Jake can't touch a penny. But more importantly, you now have the resources to make sure he never tries this again. What do you mean? Linda smiled with something that looked almost like a hunter. I mean we're going to destroy him so completely that he'll spend the rest of his life warning other predators about the dangers of messing with widows. How? Criminal charges for attempted fraud, civil lawsuits for damages, and we're going to investigate every money transaction he's made for the past 5 years. Is that legal? Perfectly legal. When someone attempts to defraud you, we can look into where his money came from, where it went, and who else he owes. We'll expose his entire operation. Operation. Oh yes. Men like Jake don't work alone. There's a whole network of people who target old victims. We're going to find them all. I thought about Lucy, about her tears when she talked about Jake's debts, about how carefully he'd tricked both of us. What happens to my daughter's marriage? That's up to Lucy. But she'll make that decision with complete information instead of lies and tricks. And the money stays secret until I decide otherwise. The beauty of Harold's plan is that you can live exactly as you have been. Or you can buy a boat tomorrow. Your choice. I gathered up the trust papers, feeling like I was holding lightning in my hands. When do we start fighting back? We already started. The moment you walked into my office, Jake Peterson became a target instead of a hunter. As I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about Harold's letter. He'd known this would happen. He'd prepared for it. He'd armed me for a war I didn't even know was coming. But more than that, he'd given me permission to win. That evening Lucy called. Mom, Jake seems really upset about something. He won't tell me what happened at your meeting. We had an interesting conversation about his plans for my future. What kind of plans? The kind that assume I'm too stupid to protect myself. Mom, he's just trying to help. Sweetheart, there are things about your husband you don't know. Things about our family money you don't know. What things? Tomorrow I think it's time you learned the truth. What truth? The truth about what your father really left me, and the truth about what I'm going to do to anyone who tries to steal it. The silence on the other end was scary. Mom, you're scaring me. Good. It's about time someone in this family was properly scared. After Lucy hung up, I sat in my kitchen holding Harold's letter, thinking about $33 million and the war it was about to buy me. Jake Peterson thought he was hunting a helpless widow. He was about to discover he'd walked into the home of a very wealthy, very angry dragon. And dragons don't negotiate with thieves. They burn them up. Friday morning came with Linda Chen's call and the sweet promise of professional revenge. I found a lawyer who specializes in prosecuting elder fraud. She wants to meet with you today. How soon? This afternoon. She's very interested in Jake's case. Why? Because she thinks he's part of a larger operation. If we can prove that, we can bring down the entire network. The afternoon meeting took place in the district attorney's office where I met Maria Santos, a sharp-eyed prosecutor who looked like she ate fraud cases for breakfast. Mrs. Miller, tell me about your son-in-law's approach. I walked her through every conversation, every manipulation, every carefully crafted lie Jake had fed me and Lucy. Classic pattern, she said, taking notes. Family connection, financial pressure, urgency to sign papers. He's done this before. How can you tell? Because beginners make mistakes. Jake knew exactly which emotional buttons to push, which legal words to use, how to structure the timeline. This is his job. So what do? We set a trap. Make him think he's won. Then document everything he does next. Linda leaned forward. What kind of trap? Mrs. Miller calls him, says she's reconsidered, wants to move forward with signing the papers. We record everything. His response, his instructions, his timeline. And then we arrest him the moment he brings a notary to witness the signing. I smiled, thinking of Jake's desperation, his gambling debts, his absolute certainty that he'd manipulated a helpless widow. When do we spring this trap? Monday. That gives us the weekend to set up recording equipment and coordinate with the police. Saturday I spent the day preparing for the performance of my life, practicing my grateful widow voice, rehearsing my lines about feeling safer with Jake's protection. Sunday brought Lucy, looking worried and confused. Mom, Jake has been acting strange. He keeps asking about Dad's money, about whether you might have hidden accounts or investments. What did you tell him? That I don't know anything about your money. But Mom, why is he so interested? I looked at my daughter, beautiful, trusting, completely unaware that her husband was a predator hunting her mother. Because he needs money more desperately than you realize. How desperately? Desperately enough to steal it from his wife's mother. Lucy stared at me. You really think he's trying to steal from you? I know he is. The question is whether you're ready to see proof. What kind of proof? The kind that will destroy your marriage but save your mother. Lucy was quiet for a long time. Finally, show me. Monday morning I called Jake with the performance of my lifetime. Jake, it's Rose. I've been thinking about our conversation. Oh. His voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the excitement underneath. I think you're right. I do need protection. I'd like to move forward with those papers. The relief in his voice was clear. That's wonderful, Rose. When would be convenient? As soon as possible. This weekend made me realize how vulnerable I really am. Perfect. I can have everything ready by this afternoon. This afternoon. I let a note of old lady confusion creep into my voice. Isn't that rather fast? These things work best when handled efficiently. I'll bring my notary. We'll get everything signed and you'll be completely protected. Protected from him. Well, if you think it's best. I do. Let's say 3 p.m. at your house. 3 p.m. sounds perfect. After I hung up, Linda nodded approvingly from her position monitoring the recording equipment. He took the bait completely. Now what? Now we wait for him to hang himself with his own rope. At exactly 3 p.m., Jake arrived with his briefcase, his notary, and his most trustworthy smile. Hidden cameras captured everything as he spread papers across my coffee table. Rose, I can't tell you how relieved I am that you're taking this step. I realized you were right about the dangers. An old woman like me needs guidance. Exactly. Now these papers will give Lucy and me the authority to protect your interests. All of my interests. All of them. Financial decisions, medical choices, living arrangements, everything. Living arrangements. He was already planning to put me somewhere convenient. And this needs to be notarized today because delays create complications. The sooner we get this in place, the sooner you're protected. I picked up the pen, letting my hand shake slightly. This is quite overwhelming. I know it seems complicated, but trust me, this is the best thing for everyone. Trust him, the man who was stealing my life while promising to protect it. I signed the first page, then paused. Jake, can I ask you something? Of course. What happens to my money after I sign this? Your money will be professionally managed. No more worrying about investments or bills or financial decisions. By whom? By people with experience. People who understand these things. People like you. People like Lucy and me, yes. I signed the second page. And if I change my mind later? Well, that would depend on your mental state at the time. These arrangements are designed to be permanent. Permanent like a life sentence. I see. I signed the third page. Jake, there's something I should mention. What's that? I think there might be more money than you realize. His eyes lit up like Christmas morning. More money. Harold may have had some accounts I didn't know about. Hidden investments, perhaps. How much more money, Rose? And there it was. The greed, the desperation, the absolute proof that this was never about protecting me. I'm not sure. Maybe significant amounts. Jake's hands were actually shaking now. Significant how? Well, I said, setting down the pen without signing the final page. That's where things get interesting. What do you mean? I smiled, thinking of $33 million and the trap we had just sprung. I mean, you're under arrest, Jake. You have the right to remain silent. The police emerged from their hiding places as Jake's face went white with shock and terror. You can't. I can. I did. And now you're going to learn what happens to predators who hunt the wrong prey. As they led him away in handcuffs, I heard him screaming about entrapment and legal challenges. But all I heard was the sound of justice being served with a $33 million side of revenge. The news broke that evening. Local businessman arrested in Elder fraud sting operation. Jake's arrest walk played on every channel. His face a mask of disbelief and rage. Lucy called sobbing. Mom, what have you done? I've protected myself from your husband's attempt to steal my independence and my money. But the arrest, the charges, this will destroy him. Good. That was the point. How can you be so cold? How can you defend a man who was systematically planning to rob your mother? Lucy showed up an hour later, her eyes red from crying. I sat her down and played the recording of Jake's confession. Every greedy word, every calculated manipulation, every moment he'd revealed his true nature. He was going to put me in a nursing home, sweetheart. He was going to steal everything your father left me and convince everyone I was too confused to object. But he loves me. He loves what he thought you could get him. There's a difference. I showed her the financial records Linda had uncovered. The gambling debts, the fake business ventures, the systematic targeting of elderly widows. This isn't his first time, Lucy. You're married to a professional predator. She stared at the evidence, her face cycling through denial, anger, and heartbreak. What am I supposed to do now? Whatever you want, but you'll do it with complete information, not with lies and manipulation. Tuesday brought Jake's father, pompous and furious. Rose, you've destroyed my son's life over a misunderstanding. I've exposed your son's criminal behavior. There's a difference. He was trying to help you. He was trying to rob me. The recordings don't lie. This is vindictive, cruel. This is justice. Your son chose to prey on elderly women. Now he gets to experience the consequences. Wednesday brought Jake's bail hearing where he tried to paint himself as a concerned family member who'd been entrapped by a paranoid widow. The judge wasn't impressed. Mr. Peterson, the evidence suggests a systematic attempt to defraud an elderly family member. Bail is set at $750,000. $750,000. Money Jake didn't have. He'd be staying in jail until trial. Thursday brought a visit from Linda with updates that made my morning coffee taste even better. The FBI is interested in Jake's case. They think he's connected to a multi-state elder fraud ring. How big? Potentially dozens of victims, millions in stolen assets. If they can flip Jake, they might bring down the entire operation. Will he cooperate? Depends how much prison time he's facing. 20 years tends to make people very talkative. 20 years. Jake would be middle-aged when he got out, assuming he survived that long in prison. Friday brought Lucy's decision. She filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and emotional fraud. "I can't stay married to someone who tried to rob my mother," she told the lawyer. "What about the house, the cars, the lifestyle he provided? All bought with borrowed money and false promises. I want nothing that came from his schemes." Lucy moved back to town, finding an apartment near mine. The experience had changed her, made her stronger, more suspicious, more aware of how people could be manipulated. "I feel so stupid," she said one evening as we sat on my porch. "You trusted someone you loved. That's not stupid. It's human." But all the signs were there. The expensive lifestyle, the vague answers about money, the sudden interest in you after we got engaged. He was very good at what he did. Professional manipulators are trained to exploit trust. "How did you know?" "I didn't at first. But your father left me resources. Tools to fight back when someone tried to steal what he'd built." "What kind of resources?" I looked at my daughter, wondering if she was ready for the truth about Harold's legacy. "The kind that turn helpless widows into very dangerous enemies." "Mom, exactly how much money did Dad leave you?" "Enough to destroy anyone who tries to steal it." The trial began in September. Jake's lawyer tried every defense: diminished capacity, entrapment, family misunderstanding. Nothing worked. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings were damning. The pattern of targeting elderly victims was undeniable. When they played the audio of Jake discussing my mental state and his plans for permanent control of my assets, even his own lawyer looked disgusted. The jury deliberated for 38 minutes. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge looked down at Jake with contempt. "Mr. Peterson, you systematically targeted vulnerable elderly people, destroyed their independence, and stole their life savings. You preyed on trust, exploited family relationships, and showed no remorse for the lives you destroyed. The court sentences you to 16 years in federal prison." 16 years. Jake would be 52 when he got out, assuming anyone would hire an ex-convict with an elder fraud conviction. As they led him away, he looked at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over, old woman." I smiled sweetly. "Yes, it is." After the trial, Linda and I celebrated at the same restaurant where Jake had first tried to manipulate me. "You realize you've become something of a legend in elder law circles," she said, raising her wine glass. "How so?" "You're the widow who fought back and won. You've inspired other victims to come forward, other families to question suspicious relatives. Good. No one should suffer what Jake planned for me. What's next for you?" I thought about Lucy rebuilding her life with hard-won wisdom. I thought about the other victims Jake had destroyed over the years. I thought about Harold's trust and the power it gave me to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Next, I make sure this never happens to anyone else. How? By using every resource at my disposal to hunt down predators before they find their next victim. Linda smiled. "That sounds expensive." "I can afford it." That night I sat in my kitchen reading Harold's letter one final time. He'd known this day would come. He'd prepared me for it. He'd given me the weapons to win a war I didn't even know was being fought. But more than that, he'd given me permission to be dangerous. Jake Peterson had learned too late that some widows bite back, and some bites are fatal. The aftermath of Jake's conviction brought unexpected visitors to my door. Lucy's mother-in-law Sandra arrived Tuesday morning, dripping with desperation disguised as dignity. "Rose, we need to discuss this unfortunate situation." "Come in, Sandra. I was wondering when you'd show up." She swept into my living room like she still owned the world, but I could see the cracks in her facade. The jewelry was still there, but it looked somehow cheaper. The designer clothes were perfectly pressed but slightly dated. "This vendetta against Jake has gone too far." "Vendetta? Is that what we're calling prosecuting criminals now?" "He made a mistake. People don't deserve to have their lives destroyed over one error in judgment." "One error, Sandra. Your son systematically targeted elderly women for years. This wasn't a mistake. It was his business model." She shifted uncomfortably, her mask of superiority slipping. "The family is suffering because of your actions. The family is suffering because of Jake's crimes. We're losing everything. The house, the business, our reputation." And there it was. Not concern for Jake, not remorse for his victims, but worry about their own social standing. How tragic. "I'm sure the elderly women Jake robbed would be devastated to hear about your inconvenience." "You don't understand. We have obligations, commitments. You had obligations to raise a son who didn't prey on vulnerable people. How did that work out?" Sandra's composure cracked completely. "What do you want from us?" "Nothing. I already got what I wanted. Justice. There must be something. Money. Public apology. Surely we can work something out." I studied her face, seeing the desperation she was trying so hard to hide. "Actually, there is something you can do." Hope flickered in her eyes. "What?" "Disappear. Move away. Change your name. Make sure no member of your family ever targets another elderly person again." That's unreasonable. Prison is unreasonable. Poverty is unreasonable. Losing your independence to a predator is unreasonable. My request is perfectly reasonable." Sandra left without another word, her dignity in tatters. Wednesday brought Jake's former business partner, a sleazy man named Tommy who'd apparently been coordinating the elder fraud network. "Mrs. Miller, I think we can help each other." "I doubt that very much. I have information about other victims. Names, amounts stolen, methods used. Information that could help you recover losses." "In exchange for what?" "Leniency for Jake. Maybe a reduced sentence, early parole." I laughed, actually laughed at his audacity. "Tommy, let me explain something. I don't negotiate with criminals. I destroy them. You're making a mistake. We could be valuable allies. You could be valuable inmates, which coincidentally is exactly what you're about to become." I called Linda immediately after he left. By Friday, Tommy was under federal investigation for his role in the fraud network. The following week brought a parade of Jake's associates, each trying to bargain their way out of prosecution: real estate agents who'd helped launder stolen money, lawyers who'd prepared fraudulent documents, bank employees who'd helped move assets. One by one I sent them all to Linda and the FBI. "You're building quite the reputation," Linda observed during one of our weekly meetings. "Word is getting out that targeting you was Jake's fatal mistake." "Good. Fear is an excellent deterrent. The federal prosecutor says your case is going to revolutionize how they handle elder fraud networks." "How so?" "Usually they catch one or two people and call it a victory. Your case is giving them access to an entire criminal organization. And the other victims. 42 confirmed so far, with more coming forward every week. Total damages over $14 million. $14 million stolen from elderly people who trusted the wrong person. Can we get their money back?" "Most of it. The federal asset forfeiture laws are very favorable when criminal enterprises are involved." "What about Jake specifically?" His personal assets are being liquidated. The house, cars, jewelry, everything. It'll be distributed among his victims, including you. I wasn't actually victimized financially since I never signed the papers. Then your share goes to the other victims. Linda, that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can spare it. That evening, Lucy came over for dinner looking healthier than she had in months. The divorce is final, she announced. How do you feel? Free. Terrified. But free. Terrified of what? Of making the same mistake again. Of trusting the wrong person. Lucy, what Jake did to you wasn't your fault. But I brought him into our family. I gave him access to you. And when you learned the truth, you chose justice over comfort. That takes courage. Did it ever occur to you that you might be in danger? That Jake's associates might try to retaliate? I smiled, thinking of the security measures Linda had helped me implement, the connections with law enforcement, the very public nature of my victory. Let them try. I'm not the helpless widow they think I am. No, you're definitely not that. As Lucy left that night, I reflected on how much had changed since Jake first approached me with his fraudulent concern. 6 months ago I'd been hiding my resources, playing the role of modest widow, keeping my head down. Now I was someone whose phone calls got returned immediately, whose concerns were taken seriously, whose enemies ended up in federal prison. But more importantly, I'd become someone who mattered to people who needed protection. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Linda's voice was excited. Rose, we just got a break in the federal case. Jake is cooperating. What's he telling them? Everything. Names, methods, locations, bank accounts. The entire Elder fraud network is about to collapse. And in exchange, reduced sentence. He'll still do significant time, but not the full 16 years. I thought about Jake in his prison cell, finally understanding that actions have consequences, that predators sometimes become prey. How much time? Probably 6 to 8 years with good behavior. 6 years. Jake would be 39 when he got out, with a federal conviction that would follow him forever. That's acceptable. There's something else. The federal prosecutor wants to interview you about creating a victim advocacy program. What kind of program? Training for law enforcement, resources for victims, legal support for prosecutions. They want to use your case as a model. I smiled, thinking of Harold's legacy and how he'd equipped me not just to protect myself, but to protect others. Set up the meeting. As I hung up, I realized that Jake Peterson had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible, a purpose that matched my resources. He tried to steal my independence and ended up giving me a mission. Some mistakes are more expensive than others. His had cost him everything and given me exactly what I needed to become dangerous to people like him. Justice, I decided, had an excellent sense of irony. The federal prosecutor's office felt different from local law enforcement. More serious, more professional, more expensive. Agent Rachel Torres greeted me with the kind of respect usually reserved for major political donors. Mrs. Miller, your case has become our gold standard for elder fraud prosecution. How so? Most victims are too embarrassed or confused to fight back effectively. You not only fought back, you destroyed an entire criminal network. I had good resources. And you used them strategically. That's what we want to discuss. Agent Torres spread files across the conference table. Photos, financial records, organizational charts showing the scope of Jake's operation. 36 victims across 5 states. Average loss of $400,000 per victim. Total damages approaching $18 million. 18 million stolen from elderly people who trusted the wrong charming young men. What happened to the other victims? Most lost their independence, their savings, their confidence in their own judgment. Several were placed in nursing homes against their will. 2 died while their assets were being systematically stolen. 2 people died while being robbed. The number hit me like a physical blow. What can we do for them? For the dead, nothing. For the survivors, everything, if you're willing to help. What kind of help? Agent Torres pulled out a thick folder labeled Victim Advocacy Initiative. We want to create a program that does for other victims what you did for yourself. Legal resources, financial protection, criminal prosecution support. Funded how? Combination of federal grants, asset forfeiture funds, and private donations. Private donations. She was asking me to bankroll justice for elderly fraud victims. How much would this cost? Initial startup around $3 million. Ongoing operations maybe $6 million annually. $6 million a year. A significant chunk of Harold's trust, but not enough to impact my security. And in exchange, we systematically destroy every elder fraud operation in the country. I thought about the 2 victims who died while being robbed, about the others who'd lost everything to predators like Jake. Where do I sign? Paperwork took 4 hours. When we finished, I was the primary funding source for the most comprehensive elder fraud prosecution program in federal history. Mrs. Miller, you realize you've just declared war on a multi-billion-dollar criminal industry. Good. Wars keep life interesting. That evening, Lucy and I celebrated the new program over dinner at the restaurant where Jake had first tried to manipulate me. Mom, are you sure about spending this much money on strangers? They're not strangers. They're people who got targeted by predators like your ex-husband. But $6 million a year is less than I earn in investment income. Your father built this wealth to protect people. I'm finally using it the way he intended. And if the program doesn't work, then we'll build a better one. Money is only useful if you use it for something that matters. Lucy raised her wine glass. To making predators pay. To making them extinct. The program launched 3 months later with spectacular results. Within the first week, we'd opened investigations in 10 states. Within the first month, we'd arrested 15 people connected to elder fraud networks. But the most satisfying call came on a Tuesday morning from Agent Torres. Mrs. Miller, we just arrested Jake's former mentor. His mentor. The man who taught him how to target elderly women. Been running these schemes for 18 years. Your program gave us the resources to build a case against him. What's his name? Robert Peterson. Jake's uncle. Jake's uncle. The family business was literally stealing from elderly people. How many victims? Over 80. Dating back to the early 2000s. He's been systematically destroying lives for decades. And now he's facing life in prison without parole. The federal charges alone will keep him locked up until he dies. Life in prison for stealing from elderly people. Finally, consequences that match the crime. There's something else, Agent Torres continued. He wants to make a deal. What kind of deal? Full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Names, methods, locations of other networks across the country. And you're considering this. We're considering it because his information could help us shut down elder fraud operations in 25 states. I thought about justice versus revenge, about protecting future victims versus punishing past crimes. Take the deal, but make sure he serves significant time. At least 12 years, even with cooperation. 12 years. Robert Peterson would be 75 when he got out, assuming he lived that long in prison. Acceptable. The information Robert provided was devastating to elder fraud networks nationwide. Within 8 months, our program had facilitated arrests in 19 states. The criminal organizations that had preyed on elderly victims for decades were collapsing like houses of cards. You've become the most feared individual in elder fraud circles, Linda told me during one of our meetings. They're actually warning each other about targeting widows because they might end up with another Rose Miller situation. What's a Rose Miller situation? Complete destruction of their criminal enterprise, federal prosecution, and asset forfeiture that leaves them bankrupt. Perfect. Fear is the best deterrent. There's talk of naming the federal elder fraud statute after you. The Miller Act. The Don't Mess with Grandma's Act was mentioned, but they thought that might be too informal. I laughed, thinking of Harold and how proud he'd be that his careful planning had led to protecting thousands of elderly people. Either name works for me. That evening I sat in my garden reading the latest program reports. In 1 year we'd recovered over $50 million for fraud victims. We'd sent dozens of predators to prison. We'd created a network of protection that extended across the entire country. But more importantly, we'd sent a message that elderly people were no longer easy targets. The phone rang, interrupting my reflection. Lucy's voice was excited. "Mom, turn on the news. Channel 4. I found the remote and switched to the local news where a reporter was standing outside the federal courthouse. In a stunning development, authorities have arrested the entire leadership of what they're calling the largest elder fraud network in U.S. history. The investigation, funded by a private donor who wishes to remain anonymous, has resulted in charges against 38 individuals across 12 states. 38 arrests, 12 states. The network that had destroyed so many lives was finally being destroyed itself. Mom, are you watching? I'm watching. How does it feel? I thought about Jake in his prison cell, about Robert Peterson facing life behind bars, about the hundreds of victims who would finally get justice. It feels like your father's money is being used exactly the way he intended. And how's that? To turn helpless widows into very dangerous enemies of people who prey on the vulnerable. As I hung up, I realized that Jake Peterson had made the most expensive mistake in elder fraud history. He'd targeted a widow who had the resources to fight back and the will to destroy anyone who threatened her. But more than that, he'd awakened something in me that I didn't know existed. The absolute determination to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Harold had left me $33 million to stay safe. I'd used it to make the world safer for everyone. Some legacies are worth more than money. This one was worth everything. 2 years after Jake's conviction, I sat in my kitchen reading a letter that made my morning coffee taste like victory. It was from Margaret Williams, the elderly librarian who'd been Jake's first victim. "Dear Rose, I wanted you to know that I got my house back. The Federal Asset Recovery Program returned everything Jake stole from me, plus damages. But more than that, I got my confidence back. I'm no longer afraid to make my own decisions or trust my own judgment. Thank you for showing me that we don't have to be victims." Margaret's letter was one of dozens I'd received from fraud victims whose lives had been restored by our program. Each one reminded me why Harold's trust had been used correctly. Not for luxury or comfort, but for justice and protection. The doorbell interrupted my reflection. I opened it to find a familiar face. Agent Torres, holding a bottle of champagne and wearing the biggest smile I'd seen since Jake's conviction. "Mrs. Miller, we need to celebrate." "What are we celebrating?" "The complete destruction of the elder fraud network that started with your case." She followed me into the kitchen where she spread newspaper clippings across my table like trophies. Final numbers. 64 arrests, 51 convictions. Over $95 million recovered for victims. $95 million returned to elderly people who'd been robbed by charming predators. And Jake's associates. All of them convicted. Tommy got 10 years. The lawyers got disbarred and prison time. Even the bank employees who helped launder money are facing federal charges. What about the victims? 96% recovered their stolen assets. The others received compensation from the victim fund you established. 96%. Almost everyone who'd been robbed got their money back. And Jake himself. Still in federal prison, still cooperating with investigations, still facing the reality that his choices destroyed his life and dozens of others. I poured 2 cups of coffee, thinking about the chain of events that had started with a humiliating seating arrangement at my daughter's wedding. Any regrets about how we handled this? Agent Torres looked at me seriously. "Mrs. Miller, your case changed how federal law enforcement approaches elder fraud. Before you, we treated these as individual crimes. Now we recognize them as organized criminal enterprises that require comprehensive response." Meaning, Jake Peterson accidentally created the most effective elder protection program in American history. I laughed, savoring the irony. He really did pick the wrong widow. He picked the wrong everything. Wrong victim, wrong family, wrong crime, wrong decade. Everything about his approach was catastrophically wrong. And now his name is synonymous with failure in criminal circles. We've intercepted communications where fraud networks specifically warn against targeting widows because of the Peterson disaster. The Peterson disaster. Jake had become a cautionary tale for other predators. What's next for the program? Expansion. We're training local law enforcement in 15 more states. We're creating victim advocacy centers in major cities. We're developing early warning systems to identify potential targets before predators find them. Funded how? The program is now self-sustaining through asset forfeiture from convicted criminals. Your initial investment has created a permanent protection system. Self-sustaining. Harold's money had bought permanent protection for vulnerable elderly people. Any new threats we should be aware of? Always. But now we're hunting them instead of waiting for victims to report crimes. After Agent Torres left, I called Lucy to share the good news. Mom, you realize you've become legendary, right? How so? I was at the store yesterday and I overheard two elderly women talking about the widow who fought back. They were discussing your case like it was a superhero movie. I'm hardly a superhero. You are to people who were being targeted by predators. You proved that elderly people don't have to be victims. I had advantages most people don't have. You had Harold's money, yes. But you also had something money can't buy. What's that? The courage to fight back when everyone expected you to surrender. That evening I walked through my house thinking about how different my life had become. 2 years ago I'd been playing the role of modest widow, hiding my resources, keeping my head down. Now I was someone whose opinions mattered to federal prosecutors, whose phone calls got returned by senators, whose example inspired other elderly people to resist manipulation. But more importantly, I'd become someone who mattered to people who needed protection. The phone rang Linda with news that made my evening complete. Rose, I just got off the phone with the federal prosecutor's office. They want to nominate you for a presidential award for public service. What kind of award? The Medal of Freedom for your contributions to elder protection and criminal justice. The Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the country. That seems excessive for protecting myself from my daughter's ex-husband. It's not excessive for creating a program that's protected thousands of elderly Americans from financial predators. I thought about Harold's letter, about his trust in my ability to use his resources wisely, about the battle fund he'd created specifically for fighting back against people like Jake. Will accepting the award require public appearances? Probably. The White House ceremony, media interviews, speaking engagements. Then I'll do it. If my visibility helps other victims find courage to fight back, it's worth the exposure. There's one more thing. They want Lucy to attend the ceremony. Why Lucy? Because your daughter's courage in choosing justice over comfortable lies is part of what made this program possible. Lucy's courage. She'd lost a husband but gained something more valuable. The knowledge that she'd chosen truth over convenient deception. I'll ask her. Rose, can I tell you something personal? Of course. When I started practicing elder law 15 years ago, I never thought I'd see the day when predators were afraid of their potential victims. You've changed the entire dynamic. Harold's money changed the dynamic. I just used it correctly. Money is just a tool. You're the one who turned it into a weapon for justice. As I hung up, I realized that Jake Peterson had given me the greatest gift imaginable. A purpose that matched my resources and a mission that honored Harold's memory. He'd tried to steal my independence and instead given me a reason to fight for everyone's independence. Some mistakes create exactly the opposite of their intended outcome. Jake had intended to make me helpless. Instead, he'd made me incredibly dangerous to people like him. And that danger would last for the rest of my life, funded by Harold's trust and motivated by the knowledge that elderly people deserved protection, not predation. The Medal of Freedom ceremony was 4 months away. I had 4 months to figure out how to use that platform to make predators even more afraid of their potential victims. It was going to be a very productive 4 months. The White House ceremony took place on a bright November morning that felt like victory distilled into weather. Lucy and I sat in the East Room surrounded by other Medal of Freedom recipients, scientists, artists, civil rights leaders, and one widow who'd accidentally started a war against elder fraud. Mrs. Rose Miller, the president announced, for her extraordinary contributions to criminal justice and elder protection, demonstrating that ordinary citizens can achieve extraordinary results when they refuse to accept injustice. As I walked to the podium, I thought about Jake Peterson sitting in his prison cell, probably watching this ceremony on television and realizing the full scope of his catastrophic mistake. Thank you, Mr. President. 2 years ago, I was a widow trying to live quietly and avoid trouble. I learned something important. Trouble doesn't avoid you just because you're polite to it. Laughter rippled through the distinguished audience. When someone tried to steal my independence under the guise of protection, I discovered that the best defense against predators is becoming a more dangerous predator yourself. The applause was thunderous. This medal doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to every elderly person who's ever been told they're too old to make their own decisions, too confused to manage their own lives, too vulnerable to protect their own interests. I looked directly into the television cameras. To anyone who preys on elderly people, we're watching, we're organized, we're well-funded, and we're very, very angry. Find a different line of work. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. After the ceremony, Lucy and I celebrated at the hotel bar, surrounded by Secret Service agents and fellow medal recipients. Mom, did you just threaten criminals on national television? I promised them consequences. There's a difference. The president looked impressed. Good. Presidential support makes our funding more secure. What's next? Next, we use this platform to expand the program internationally. Elder fraud is global. Our response should be too. The media attention from the ceremony was extraordinary. Within a week, I'd given interviews to every major news network, several international outlets, and 3 documentary filmmakers. Each interview carried the same message. Elderly people were no longer easy targets, and predators who thought otherwise would face systematic destruction. The response was immediate and satisfying. Law enforcement agencies from 8 countries contacted our program requesting assistance with their own elder fraud cases. But the most satisfying call came from Agent Torres. Mrs. Miller, we're seeing something unprecedented. What's that? Elder fraud reports are down 70% nationally. Not because fewer crimes are being committed, but because fewer people are attempting them. Fear is an excellent deterrent. It's more than fear. Word has spread through criminal networks that targeting elderly people now carries unacceptable risk. What kind of risk? Federal prosecution, asset forfeiture, and the possibility of facing a Rose Miller situation. I'd become a threat that criminals warned each other about. Jake's attempt to victimize me had turned me into every predator's nightmare. Any specific threats against me personally? None credible. Most criminals are smart enough to realize that attacking you would bring down the full weight of federal law enforcement. And the ones who aren't that smart will learn the hard way that some targets fight back with unlimited resources. That evening I sat in my garden reading letters from fraud victims whose lives had been restored by our program. Teachers who'd gotten their pensions back, veterans who'd recovered their disability payments, widows who'd regained their independence. Each letter reminded me that Harold's trust was being used exactly as he'd intended, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. The phone rang. Linda's voice was excited. Rose, Congress wants to hold hearings on elder fraud prevention. They want you to testify. About what? About creating a permanent federal program based on our model. They're considering legislation that would make elder fraud a federal crime punishable by life imprisonment. Life imprisonment for stealing from elderly people. Finally, consequences that match the damage. When do they want me to testify? Next month. Committee on Aging. Full Senate hearing. National television coverage. Perfect. It's time to make this program permanent. There's something else. Jake's parole hearing is scheduled for the same week. His parole hearing. He'd served 4 years. Technically eligible for early release with good behavior. I smiled, thinking of the timing. While I was testifying about protecting elderly people, Jake would be begging for freedom he didn't deserve. Will I have the opportunity to speak at his hearing? Victim impact statement: yes. You could argue against his release. Good. I have a few things to say about Jake Peterson's rehabilitation. The Senate hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday. Jake's parole hearing was Thursday. I had 1 week to prepare testimony that would cement the federal program and ensure Jake stayed exactly where he belonged. It was going to be a very busy week. But as I looked around my garden, thinking about Harold's legacy and the war it had funded, I realized I'd never been more prepared for battle. Jake Peterson had spent 4 years in prison learning that actions have consequences. He was about to learn that some consequences last forever. The parole board was about to meet a widow who'd spent 4 years building a criminal justice program specifically designed to destroy people like Jake. This was going to be educational for everyone involved, especially for Jake. The Senate hearing room felt like a cathedral of justice, with marble columns and enough television cameras to broadcast my testimony to every potential predator in America. I sat at the witness table wearing my best armor, a navy suit that whispered authority, and the diamond earrings Harold had given me for our 40th anniversary. Mrs. Miller, Senator Williams began, you've created the most successful elder fraud prevention program in American history. How did a retired widow become the nation's leading expert on protecting elderly Americans? I became an expert by refusing to become a victim, Senator. When someone tried to steal my independence, I decided to make sure it never happened to anyone else. Tell us about your son-in-law's approach. I walked them through Jake's systematic manipulation, the family connection, the false concern, the urgent timeline, the documents designed to steal control of my life. He targeted me because he thought I was helpless, isolated, and trusting. He was wrong on all counts. What made you fight back when most victims don't? My husband left me resources to protect myself, but more importantly, he left me permission to be dangerous to people who prey on the vulnerable. The hearing room was silent except for the clicking of cameras. Dangerous how? Dangerous enough to destroy criminal enterprises that target elderly people. Dangerous enough to send dozens of predators to federal prison. Dangerous enough that criminals now warn each other about the risks of targeting widows. Senator Chen leaned forward. What would you say to elderly Americans who feel vulnerable to these schemes? I looked directly into the television cameras, knowing that somewhere Jake was watching from his prison cell. I'd say that vulnerability is a choice. You can choose to be helpless, or you can choose to be terrifying to people who want to hurt you. I recommend terrifying. The applause was deafening. What legislative changes would you recommend? Make elder fraud a federal crime punishable by life imprisonment. Make it so expensive and dangerous that no rational criminal would attempt it. Life imprisonment seems severe. Senator, stealing an elderly person's independence is a life sentence for the victim. The punishment should match the crime. The hearing lasted 5 hours. When it ended, I'd effectively written the blueprint for permanent federal legislation that would protect elderly Americans for generations. 2 days later, I sat in a different kind of room, smaller, grimmer, where Jake Peterson would face a parole board that would determine whether he spent the next decade in prison or walking free. Jake entered in prison clothes, looking older, thinner, diminished. 4 years of federal prison had stripped away his polished veneer, revealing the desperate predator underneath. His lawyer presented the standard arguments: model prisoner, rehabilitation programs, remorse for his actions. Then it was my turn. Members of the board, 4 years ago Jake Peterson targeted me because he thought I was a helpless widow with modest assets he could steal. He was catastrophically wrong on both counts. I opened my folder and spread financial documents across the table. Mr. Peterson wasn't targeting modest assets. He was attempting to steal $33 million from a widow who had the resources to destroy him. The parole board member's eyes widened. And destroy him I did. His criminal operation was dismantled. His associates were prosecuted. His victims recovered their stolen assets. His name became synonymous with failure in criminal circles. Jake's face had gone white. But the real question isn't what I did to Mr. Peterson. The question is whether he's learned anything from the experience. I looked directly at Jake, who was staring at me with the same hatred I'd seen at his sentencing. Mr. Peterson, have you learned that elderly people can fight back? His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but Jake couldn't resist responding. I learned that some people have more money than they deserve. The room fell silent. After 4 years in prison, Jake was still bitter about failing to steal my inheritance. And that, members of the board, is why Mr. Peterson should serve his full sentence. He's not rehabilitated. He's just angry that his victim had bigger teeth than he expected. The parole board deliberated for 22 minutes. Mr. Peterson, your parole is denied. You will serve your full sentence. Your next parole hearing will be in 2 years. 2 more years. Jake would be 41 when he got out, with a federal conviction that would follow him forever. As they led him away, he looked at me one final time. This isn't over. I smiled sweetly. Yes, it is. Outside the hearing room, Lucy was waiting with champagne and the biggest smile I'd seen since Jake's original conviction. How does it feel, Mom? Complete. Jake is staying in prison. The federal program is becoming permanent. And elderly people across the country are safer because one predator made the mistake of targeting the wrong widow. And the program will outlive both of us. Harold's Trust has created a permanent protection system that will hunt predators long after I'm gone. We drove home through the city where this war had begun, past the restaurant where Jake had first tried to manipulate me, past the courthouse where he'd been convicted, past the hotel where Lucy had decided to choose truth over comfortable lies. Mom, can I ask you something? Anything. Are you happy with how this turned out? I thought about Harold's letter, about his trust in my ability to protect myself and others, about the $33 million that had become a weapon for justice. I'm proud. I'm satisfied. I'm grateful that your father gave me the tools to fight back. And Jake. Jake gave me the greatest gift possible. A purpose that matched my resources. How so? He tried to steal my independence and accidentally gave me a mission to protect everyone's independence. As we pulled into my driveway, I realized the circle was complete. 2 years ago I'd been a modest widow hiding behind flower arrangements. Tonight I was a Medal of Freedom recipient who'd declared war on an entire category of criminal and won. Marcus Thornfield had learned too late that some widows don't just bite back. They bite with federal funding, unlimited resources, and the absolute determination to protect people who can't protect themselves. The war was over. Justice had won. And somewhere in a federal prison, Jake Peterson was learning that some mistakes last forever. Harold's $33 million had bought the most expensive lesson in American criminal history. Never underestimate a widow with unlimited resources and a very good lawyer. Some lessons are worth every penny. 5 years later, I received a letter that made everything worthwhile. It was from a support group of elderly fraud survivors. People who had fought back because they'd heard my story. Dear Mrs. Miller, we wanted you to know that your courage gave us courage. Because you showed us that we don't have to be victims, we fought back too. 12 predators are now in prison because 12 elderly people refused to surrender. Your legacy isn't just the money you spent or the criminals you caught. It's the knowledge that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they refuse to accept injustice. Thank you for showing us that some widows have very sharp teeth. I folded the letter and smiled, thinking of Harold and how his simple trust fund had become a revolution. Jake Peterson had tried to steal from one widow and accidentally inspired thousands of elderly people to fight back. Sometimes the best revenge is living well enough to protect everyone else. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.